you have occasion, Rick, to examine the 1994 Camaro?
Yes.
Where did you examine the Camaro at?
At the Huron County Sheriff's Department.
And did you take photographs?
On which day, sir?
On November 25th, 2005, you take photographs of the Camaro?
In 2025 or two?
Yes, 2025.
I'm sorry, yes.
And for what purpose would you take the photographs?
This was a re-examination of the vehicle and looking specifically at a couple of areas on the vehicle that were of interest to us.
And what were those areas?
We refer to it as the A-pillar. It's where the windshield comes down and meets with the hinges of the door on the passenger side. And that's the interior side of it.
I'm going to provide you with what's been marked as State Exhibits 93A through 93Z.
Okay.
What did I just provide you?
93A is my photograph log. That is the log of all of the photographs that I took on November the 25th, 2025 in relation to the Camaro. 93B is the photograph of the front of the vehicle. 93C is the right front corner of the Camaro. 93D is the passenger side of the Camaro. 93E is the right rear corner of the Camaro. 93F is the rear of the Camaro. 93G is the left rear corner of the Camaro. 93H is the driver's side of the Camaro. 93I is the left front corner of the Camaro. 93J is the interior passenger compartment of the vehicle. 93K is also another photograph of the interior passenger compartment of the vehicle, as is 93L. 93M is a photograph of the driver's door that I took before we made entry into the door. 93N is a photograph of the passenger side rocker panel. 93O is a photograph of the A-pillar hinge portion of the right front passenger door, including the marks that were in question. 93P is a close-up of one of those marks that is actually on the interior portion of the dashboard. 93Q is a photograph of two of the marks that were actually on the door at the A-pillar portion of the interior of the vehicle. 93R is a photograph with scale of the two marks that were on the door by the A-pillar. 93S is another one of another photograph of the same marks using a scale. 93T, we were actually looking a little bit closer because with the marks, there's a spacing between the actual mud marks or transfers that were on there. So we were looking at the spacing between those. 93U is another photograph similar to that. 93V is a comparison using Regina Hicks's right shoe that she was wearing at the time that she was discovered in the water, and in comparison to that with the mark that's on the door. 93W is another photograph, another angle, the same type of photograph. And do you want me to go through the rest of those? Because those look like duplicates.
We'll get to those later.
Okay.
Are these all true and accurate photographs?
Yes, they are.
You were made all these photographs?
You may.
Turn your attention to 93B. What is 93B?
93B is the photograph of the front of the Chevy Camaro.
Where was this located at?
This was in the EMA garage at Huron County Sheriff's Department.
93C,
Left front corner of the Camaro.
93D,
Passenger side of the Camaro.
'93E,
That's the right rear corner of the Chevy Camaro.
93F,
Photograph of the rear of the vehicle.
93G,
That'll be the left rear corner of the vehicle of the Chevy Camaro.
93H,
That'll be the driver's side of the Chevy Camaro.
93I,
That'll be the left front corner of the Chevy Camaro.
93J,
That's the view inside the driver's compartment from the driver's side window.
and what's the significance of this photograph?
The photographs that I took, first off, the first 8 photographs are to demonstrate what the vehicle will look like at the time that I encountered it for this examination. And then when I'm taking this photograph, what I wanted to look at was the void area. You can see the reddish portion of the actual seat. Moss has grown up off of the side closer to the outboard portion of it.
When you say void area, what do you mean?
The area that doesn't have any of the sediments or any of the moss that's grown on it.
So why do you call it a void area?
Because there's nothing there to it right now. And it was actually from the initial time that I looked at the vehicle back in 2002, that area was void also of sediment and mud deposits.
So how were you brought into the Regina Hicks investigation?
A gentleman by the name of Alan Hayes, who was the law enforcement coordinator for the Regional Information Sharing Network, it's a federally funded organization that helps share information between law enforcement agencies throughout the country. He was up in Huron County, and the detectives asked him if he knew of anybody that had an expertise in waterborne environments, and so that he provided them with my name. And Detective Sergeant Dane Howard called and asked me if I would come up and take a look at the vehicle and go over the information about the case.
And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do after 2002?
In September of 2002, I went up, I actually drove up to, you have to forgive me for just a second. I drove up to the Sheriff's Department.
All right, so this witness providing information about evidence found around the car in that pond. Important because, of course, the defense is claiming that she drove herself into the pond. All right, we'll have more key testimony in Ohio versus Paul Hicks coming up. Plus, we're also getting new images of the person of interest in the deadly Brown University shooting, and city officials now plan to hold a news conference at 4 p.m. We'll have more details on that right after the break. Stay with us here on Court TV. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. Breaking news coming into our newsroom in the investigation into the Brown University shooting. Apparently, new images are being released by investigators in that deadly Brown University shooting. Now, investigators, they're asking for the public's help in identifying and speaking to the individual shown in these photos. Now, again, this is not the actual person of interest. We had that video yesterday. This is a person that police believe was in proximity of the person of interest. Investigators are asking for the public's help identifying this person, which, of course, if they get to speak to this person, they may be able to lead them to the person that they believe may be responsible for this crime. And city officials do plan to hold a news conference today at 4 p.m. where hopefully we will learn more about the situation and the investigation. We plan, if at all possible, to bring that news conference to you live right here on Court TV. Again, set to begin around 4 p.m. Let's bring in our guest, still with us, former LA County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé. And Philip, as I said, I was wondering who this video was. And you can clearly see the gentleman in this video. And I got to say, this is absolutely positively, between video and these types of pictures, the best way to identify someone. There has to be someone watching through all the different channels that this will be released. Who knows this gentleman?
Oh, are you kidding? Someone's going to phone in a tip, especially if there's going to be a reward announced. You can bet that the phone will be ringing off the hook. But make no mistake about it, Michael, a lot of people don't realize this, but video imagery is not an official identification. Just because somebody resembles some type of image in a video does not necessarily prove identification. Booking photos also. I cannot tell you over the years, Michael, how many clients I have. They get arrested, they get printed, their mugshot taken, and district attorneys and the police try to use those photos as official ID. They are not. What you really need is something a little more concrete. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that an independent witness can't point him out. You might, for example, have a student or a faculty member from the university who may have seen him running from the scene, and he may strongly resemble the person based on the attire, based on facial features, based on their gait, all of that kind of stuff. I am telling you, it is just a matter of time before they apprehend somebody.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And to your point, when we were showing you close-ups there of the face,
Yeah.
you can make out the face, but it is not an exact identification at all. But again, that sort of larger picture of the person, when you talk about the countenance, the walking style, all those things, adds in helping to identify who it is. All right, Philip, stand by. I want to take folks back to Ohio now for the drowned wife murder trial of defendant Paul Hicks. Again, prosecutors say that he knocked his wife, Regina, unconscious, left her inside of her car, and then sent it rolling into a pond where she drowned. Now, it happened in 2001, but Hicks wasn't arrested until 25 years later. Investigators actually got a break in the case when Hicks's friend, who had previously given Hicks an alibi, changed his story. And now he says that he witnessed the murder. Let's go back into court. Still on direct, a former Ohio State Highway Patrol investigator.
And met with two detectives up there, and we went through the highlights of the case, the briefing of the case, took a look at some of the photographs from the scene, took a look at the vehicle, and then we drove out to the scene out where the pond was and took a look at the pond as well.
For what purpose did Dane Howard seek your assistance?
The initial question that they had was, could a body float from a driver's side to a passenger side of a motor vehicle that was submerged in water and rest on the passenger side in the position that Regina Hicks was found when the vehicle was recovered?
And what did you do to answer that question?
I looked at the photographs, I looked the vehicle over, I looked the pond over. I went back and I did some research and understanding looking through the potential for body refloat and how her body was actually positioned inside the motor vehicle, and came up with the conclusion that she was in the right front passenger seat when that vehicle entered the water.
So that was back in 2002?
Yes, sir.
State Certificate 93K.
That is a view of the front passenger seat from the driver's window.
93L.
That's the view of the rear seats from the driver's window.
93M.
That is the passenger door, photograph of the passenger door before I opened the door.
93N.
That is a photograph of the passenger side rocker panel foot kick when I opened the door.
What is a rocker panel foot kick?
It's the dark black step on there where a person can step in, step out, and not lose their footing. That's the design of it.
And what did you find on the rocker panel foot kick?
There are deposits of mud on the rocker panel, if you can see on the flat spot of the black portion of it, directly across from the where the passenger seat cushion would be.
And were those deposits there back in 2002 when you examined the car the first time?
Yes.
Turn your attention to Exhibit 93-0. 93-0.
This is a photograph of the A-pillar, the interior portion where the hinges are, showing the marks. You can see that there's one mark that has kind of a curvature and striations pointing downward. Just to the lower and right side of that, you can see kind of a smudge mark. And then to the interior of the dashboard itself, there's a smudge mark of mud on the lower portion of the inner side of the dashboard.
Is that significant to you?
Yes, it is.
Why is that?
The marks were actually protected from the waterborne environment. So they were actually preserved when the vehicle went into the water, when it came out of the water, and when they did their examination of it.
So were those marks that we see photographed here in November 2025 present in 2002 when you looked at the vehicle?
Yes.
Is there, what's the significance of the marks on the door?
The mark that shows kind of the curvature with the striations that are downward are actually, once I got to take a really good close look at it, are actually boot marks. And it's from the sole of the boot that creates a deposit of mud, a transfer. The target area would be the actual door itself, so that we put it all in perspective. And then the smudge mark wiping downward is an indication that a boot was placed up against it and slid downward.
And did you obtain any boots?
Yes.
Whose boots did you obtain?
Regina Hicks's boots.
And any boot in particular?
Her right boot. Do you want me to put gloves on, sir? Am I going to handle that?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so the witness testifying that it appears that Regina's boots left this striation mark on the passenger side door, which is, of course, consistent with the story being told by the state that she was placed in there by the defendant. All right, more key testimony coming up in Ohio versus Paul Hicks. Keep it here on your front row seat to justice. All right, folks, let's head back to Ohio now for more of the drowned wife murder trial of defendant Paul Hicks. Investigators say that Hicks killed his wife, Regina, back in 2001 by knocking her unconscious and then sending her car into a pond where she drowned. Now, the case went cold for more than 2 decades until a witness in the case came forward and told investigators that he saw Hicks kill Regina. Now, on the stand is a former Ohio State Highway Patrol investigator, and he's being asked about Regina's muddy boots. Let's go back in.
So I just handed you part of State Exhibit 75.
Okay.
What is it?
This is the right boot that was recovered from Regina Hicks when the vehicle was recovered back in 2001.
So what did you do with respect to this boot and that mark on the interior portion of that door?
We took measurements of the distance between each one of the lugs in the boot and compared it to the mark that's actually on the door itself, and then laid in comparison to see how they lined up. And the curvature of the boot, the marks, the void spaces between the marks all lined up to this boot.
So what did you conclude?
That this boot was pressed up against that door and swiped in a downward fashion as she was being placed into the vehicle.
State's Exhibit 93P.
That is the mark on the inside of the dashboard, inside the A-pillar portion. It is a mud transfer from actually the top of the boot as the boot would roll into the vehicle.
So would that be the same boot?
Same boot, yes.
Again, back to State Exhibit 75, the right portion of it. If you could explain, please.
As the foot or shoe is sliding downward and rotating in, it creates a transfer mark from the inner portion of the shoe itself, and that's what created the mark that was there.
93Q.
That's a close-up of the two marks that are on the door itself.
The passenger door.
The passenger door, right front passenger door, yes.
93R.
That is a photograph with us using a measuring device to put it to scale.
To what scale?
The centimeters to scale for the mark that is on the lower portion of the door.
93S.
That is the putting to scale the mark that we were just talking about on the inner portion of the door with the striations going downward.
93T.
That is a photograph of measuring the distance between the mud mark transfers and the void areas.
93U.
Just another photograph of the scale showing that the distance between the mud marks.
93V.
That's where we put the right front, or I'm sorry, the front of the right shoe of Regina Hicks in comparison to the mud mark itself and had it match up.
93W.
It's just another view of the same photograph, but using additional light source to better highlight the marks and the location with the lugs.
93X.
I don't have a 93X.
93Y. Sorry.
Oh, there's 93X.
What's 93X?
That is a photograph, again, with a little bit closer view, using an alternate light to highlight the placement of the lugs and how they matched up with the mud transfers.
93Y.
That's a photograph of the bottom of the soles and the lugs of Regina Hicks' shoe.
And 93Z.
That is a closer view of her shoe with a scale to it.
you had reviewed the original crime scene photos.
Yes.
And for what purpose did you do that?
Back in 2002, when I looked the photographs over, it helped me to get a better understanding of the questions that was being asked about how she was placed inside the vehicle, or her placement inside the vehicle at the time that it went into the water.
And did you review those again recently?
Yes, I did.
And for what purpose?
To refresh my memory about what was there, to take a look at the crime scene again and understand any additional information that might be gleaned from all of that.
And what did that assist you in doing?
Helping me to solidify my decisions on how the vehicle was placed into the water, where she was placed into the water, and actually how she got into the vehicle.
So we'll take a look at those for those three purposes.
Okay.
And direct your attention to State's Exhibit 29. Date stamps 6/15.
All right, we're going to stop it here. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from this witness, his opinion on how she got into the car. That's coming up. We'll take a break here. Thanks to Philip Dubé. He's actually sticking around for the next hour. We'll have more from Ohio. Keep it here on Court TV. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. We're tracking several cases across the country here at Court TV. In California, Nick Reiner appeared in court and he waived his right to a speedy arraignment after being charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the stabbing deaths of his parents, Rob and Michelle. He's due back in court on January 7th. Also in California, a jury continues deliberating the fate of Maya Hernandez, the mom accused of leaving her son to die in a hot car while she got a Brazilian butt lift. I'm going to bring you that verdict live when it comes down. And in Florida, a new round of subpoenas in family court may offer a glimpse into the case surrounding the cruise ship death of Anna Kepner. We'll bring you that hearing just a bit later today. For now, we are in Ohio, where Paul Hicks is standing trial, accused of drowning his wife almost 25 years ago. I want to take you back into court now, where a retired investigator is testifying on direct examination by the state.
That is a photograph of the scene at the edge of the roadway leading up to or pointing towards the pond area.
What is the next page stamp number in the exhibit on the next page?
616.
Okay. What is 616?
That is a closer view of the slight incline leading up to the plateau before you get into the edge of the water.
Back in 2002, did you go out to the pond and examine it?
Yes, I did.
And did you look at the photos that were taken in 2001?
Yes.
And how would you characterize the entrance into the pond?
Looking at the photographs and walking the scene, I didn't see any changes.
Was it steep?
There's a slight, when you leave the roadway, it levels off slightly, and then there is a slight incline, and as you get to what we refer to as the plateau, the top, where there's a small flat spot, and then it gets to the edge of the water line, and then it's a fairly steep drop down into the water.
And that's how it appeared in 2001, 2002?
Yes.
What is the next photograph in the exhibit?
617.
And what do we see?
This is a slightly backed off version of 616, showing the rise from the ground level up to the plateau, and it gives a little bit better view of the the concrete barriers that are off to the right side there.
618.
This is a view of the plateau area leading down into the bank of the water, down to the water line itself.
Okay, how would you characterize, well, what's the bank made of?
The photograph there, once you reach the plateau and it starts to change to the actual bank of the water, it is a gravel line there. And then the further down you get, it transitions from a gravel-ish area down to a kind of a mud or dirt.
628.
That is a photograph of the Chevy Camaro being removed from the water. You can still see the anchor marks from the chains that were used to pull it up out of the water.
629.
629 is a little closer view of the passenger side of the Chevy Camaro. As it was being brought back up, the significance that I had to that photograph was that the passenger side window was down slightly.
And why is that significant?
As we go on through, it'll show that there are photographs of the driver's side window was completely down. And that helped.
Why does that matter?
It helps to understand the mechanics of how the vehicle was submerged into the water, how it went in the positioning of how it went down into the water, and how the air was released from inside the vehicle.
Why would air be released from inside the vehicle?
As the vehicle submerges or loses its buoyancy, what's going to happen is air is going to have to escape the passenger compartment. And as the air escapes the passenger compartment, it's kind of like, think of it in this term. You have a gas can, and you have your nozzle, and there's a little hole in the back that allows the air to flow out. If you close that off and you rotate the nozzle forward, it just kind of chugs as the gasoline escapes the canister. What it's trying to do is equalize pressure inside and outside so that the gasoline flows. If you were to open that rear little hole and pour, it allows the air to flow out, and it gives it a more stable fluid release from inside the can. The same thing occurs in a motor vehicle. The driver's side window being completely down and the passenger side window being partially down. Think of it in the terms of the driver's side window is the nozzle. The passenger side window is that little escape hole for the air equalization. And as the vehicle submerges, what happens is the air gets pushed upward because of the pressure that's being created by the water itself, plus the water filling the void of the open space inside the passenger compartment. So the air has to escape in some fashion.
646.
This is a photograph of the driver's seat, the actual seat cushion, with some marks that you can see that we would refer to as void areas.
And why was this significant for you?
When Regina, when the vehicle went into the water and started to settle in, and Regina's body starts to relax. As the body relaxes, it's going to fall into a very specific nature, and it's going to rotate to the most downward portion. And what happened was her body leaned over, the upper torso area of her body leaned over to the driver's seat itself, and you can see some of the marks that are on the seat that are actually like from her shirt. So that's the texture that you see there. And so she laid there, and as the sediment settles from inside the water, the sediment would settle around her, but not in the specific area where she was actually laying.
All right, let's welcome back in our guest, still with us, former L.A. County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé. Philip, listen, this expert, you remember when we first started showing him, the judge told the jury, look, he's not testifying as an expert, but I got to say, as I listened to him, he certainly sounds like he's testifying like an expert. What do you make of it?
Yeah, and frankly, I don't think he's qualified to talk about the transfer, if you will, of strike marks and mud and detritus on the side panel of that door. If you're going to have that type of glancing blow or transfer or just some type of markings on there, it could be from anything. I cannot tell you, Michael, how many times I get in and out of my own car where nowadays, particularly, the doors are so heavy, you open it and it automatically shuts on you. So what do? You take your foot and you kick it open. I can't tell you how often I do that. And God forbid, I'm implicated in a homicide. They're going to blame it on the mud that I left behind from my shoes. It's absurd. So hopefully the defense will bring in their own expert to show that anybody's shoe could have done that. And by the way, it doesn't even prove that that mud or debris wasn't there before she came up missing. It could have been there all along. So I just think, frankly, I don't even know why the judge allowed it in.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And but what you're talking about is great fodder for a cross-examination. I imagine those are the places they're going to go, because as just now he was testifying about the oxygen coming up and the air going down, and all the water coming in. I'm thinking, at least according to the defense, they're claiming that she drove herself in, right? Or at least that's the story that he told. And when you think about it, if it goes in and there's water rushing in through one window, maybe the other window is half closed or half up, that water pressure could push her from the driver's side to the other side, right? I mean, that's a possibility here. So while this sounds like solid testimony for the state, it's still a little murky.
Absolutely. And it could also be that, assuming she really did do that, that maybe as the car was submerging into the water, she had second thoughts. And she couldn't get out. So what is she doing? She's kicking, trying to get out, and she couldn't. And what happened? She drowned. So it could also be that for him to get up there and just conclude that this is as a result of her being just thrown into the car and secured in there so the car can just sink down to the bottom of a pond. I just think it's reckless and unqualified. And the problem with that is that juries tend to accept this type of junk science out of the mouths of cops. It comes out so authoritarian as if it were gospel. And the truth be told, it's completely unsubstantiated. And unless and until the defense counters it, it sounds like the jury is going to embrace it.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And he even went so far as to testify that the swipe on the door was the boot going down. Like, how do you know that? It could have been, so like you said, there's a million different ways it could have gotten there or when it could have gotten there. Anyway, yeah. All right, Philip, stand by. It's time for us to take a quick break. When we come back, of course, we're going to have more key testimony in Ohio versus Paul Hicks. So keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a Hollywood icon and his wife stabbed to death and their own son charged with their murders. Our teams are live with the latest in the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
A Microsoft executive gunned down.
Now his ex and her new husband are charged with his murder.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
Turning now back to Ohio, where a man is on trial for the death of his wife almost 25 years ago. Paul Hicks is accused of rendering his wife, Regina Hicks, unconscious before putting her in the passenger seat of her car and driving it into a pond where she drowned. The prosecutors say the couple was separated at the time due to Paul's violent tendencies and that they were fighting over custody of their child at the time. On the stand right now is a retired investigator. His name is Richard Wells. He's still on direct by the state. Let's go back in.
647.
This is a photograph of the right side portion of the driver's controls dashboard.
What do you learn from the driver's control dashboard?
The defrosters were on, and you can see the ignition in the on position.
And was the fan on?
Yes.
And what level was the fan on?
I can't tell exactly from this photograph, but from another angle of the photograph, it was on all the way.
Is there any significance to that?
If a person is driving a vehicle, first off, if it's still cold outside, you want to defrost the windows and keep the temperature up so that it doesn't fog up on the inside of the windows. If a person is driving down the road with a vehicle as a manner of trying to stay warm, you would want to turn the defrost on.
648.
This is a better view of the passenger side dashboard and some of the marks that were on the glove box door and on the right side of some of the photographs that I took from earlier.
And in fact, the marks on the right side of the dashboard, are they still there?
Yes, they are.
650.
This is a photograph of the steering wheel, the gear shift, and the headlights switch.
And which switch was the headlight switch on? What position was the headlight switch on?
They were turned off.
And the steering wheel?
Up all the way.
651. Okay. We'll look at 651.
This is a photograph of Regina Hicks inside the vehicle, slightly tilted to the left, and her feet down underneath the dashboard.
Now, in coming up with the conclusion that she never left the passenger seat of the car, is this picture significant?
Say that again, please.
In rendering the conclusion that Regina Hicks was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and the car went into the pond, is this picture significant?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
If you look at her feet are literally trapped underneath the dashboard, right foot over top of left foot, and it would catch inside there. In the potential for a body refloat, that's going to be something that's going to prevent it from floating upward. If she was in the driver's seat of the vehicle and the potential for a body refloat would occur, to have her float, reposition herself, move over to the passenger seat, and as she was gassing off, and that would be the release of the decomposition gas, for her to settle back down, her feet would never rest in a position like that.
651. 655, I'm sorry.
This is a photograph of Regina Hicks slumped over the center console area, face down, and creating that void area that we were talking about earlier.
661.
This is
Micah answer.
This is a photograph of Regina Hicks inside the vehicle. Again, you can see her feet are tangled up underneath the dashboard, and this was the position that she was actually found in when they recovered the vehicle. Slumped upper torso across the center console, and head and chest regions laying on the driver's side seat cushion.
664.
A close-up photograph of Regina Hicks's feet being trapped underneath the dashboard.
And again, the pictures of Regina Hicks's feet, you testified to the significance of that.
Yes.
665.
This is a photograph indicating the distance from the steering wheel to the backing of the driver's seat.
And what significance of that was to you?
The distance that it is from there would indicate, if we were looking at the potential for body refloat, she would have been trapped inside there, and she would not have been able to float from out of there across and over to the passenger seat and down.
And why is that?
Because of the compressed space that we have there. Although the steering wheel is in an upward position, it still wouldn't allow her to completely disengage from there. And again, rotate with her feet to the right side and over and then down. The reason that she wouldn't be able to do that is because the boots that she is wearing are going to be negatively buoyant. Her upper body area would be a little bit more buoyant, and then she would have actually floated and gone almost more in a head-down motion, with her feet actually probably hanging off to the driver's side seat.
666.
Just another close-up photograph of how she was discovered when they removed the vehicle from the water.
668.
This is a photograph from the driver's side showing her face down, and if you can see her arm, it's in a more comfortable position, so it wasn't a fighting position or anything like that, which would tell me that she was unconscious as she rotated over to that side and down underneath.
669.
Again, another photograph of Regina Hicks with her feet trapped underneath the dashboard.
670.
That's a close-up photograph of the headlight switch, indicating that the headlights were turned off.
671.
That's a close-up of the ignition switch, showing that the ignition switch was engaged into the on or run position.
And 673.
This is a close-up photograph of Regina Hicks's face. The significance to that is, if you look closely down at the bottom of the photograph in her right ear, you will notice that there is a mud buildup there inside that right ear. And that is caused by a dragging movement where mud is collected into the ear as opposed to sediment being deposited onto the ear.
Did you look at any of the autopsy photos?
Yes, I did.
For what reason did you do that?
There was, we were looking at the potential for drag, how she was moved or carried and placed into the vehicle. And the autopsy report noted that there were bruising on the right and left bicep areas, and they actually opened those upper lance down to see if there was subdural damage to the area.
You know, no matter what you think about this witness's expertise and what he's testifying to, I will tell you earlier today, the jury heard from that best friend who came forward, and he told them that he saw the defendant placing the body of Regina on the passenger side of the car. So there's that to bolster his testimony as well. We couldn't show that to you. He opted out of audio and video as well. But coming back, we're going to have more testimony in Ohio versus Paul Hicks. And a little bit later, the mayor and other city officials in Providence, Rhode Island, they plan to hold a news conference on that deadly shooting at Brown University. That's expected to begin about 4 o'clock Eastern. We won't let you miss it. We're going to take you there live, so keep it here on your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. Now back to Ohio for the drowned wife murder trial of defendant Paul Hicks. Prosecutors say that he knocked his wife, Regina, unconscious and then left her inside of her car and then sent it rolling into a pond where she drowned. This happened back in 2001, but Hicks actually wasn't arrested until 25 years later. Investigators got a break in the case when Hicks's friend, who had previously given Hicks an alibi, changed his story. And earlier today, that witness, Steve Gates, testified that he actually saw Hicks place Regina's body in the car and saw it slumped over in the passenger seat of the car before it went into the pond. Let's go back into court now. Still on direct, a former Ohio State Highway Patrol investigator talking about that crime scene.
That photograph?
Yes, I did.
We showed you what's been previously identified as Exhibit 3C.
Am I going to handle anything else?
No, you can take
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Date stamp 54.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
And what are we looking at here?
Those are the bruise marks that were noted in the autopsy report with the actual lancing of those marks to look subdural.
And what did that mean to you?
Prior to the lancing of the marks, if they were intact, it shows that there was a depression or pressure applied enough to create damage to the capillaries in the area to create a bruising, and they're in a fashion that could be noted as a hand mark.
As a result of your investigation in 2002 and 2025, did you reach a view as to how or where Regina Hicks was sitting in the car when the car went into the pond?
Absolutely.
Where was she at?
She was in the right front passenger seat of that motor vehicle when it entered the water.
And did she ever move from that?
No, she did not.
Now, with respect to the motor vehicle itself, one more, please.
All right, so once again, the prosecutor continues his direct examination of Richard Wells. He was an investigator in the case, and again, as we mentioned earlier, some of his testimony has sort of, actually, it's begun again. Let's get back into court.
In examining the car, did you reach a conclusion as to how Regina Hicks ended up in the car?
Yes.
All right, so they've gone to sidebar. I want to bring in our guest still with us, former LA County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé. And Philip, it seemed as though, and this might go back to what we talked about earlier, this idea that he's not an expert, but some of his testimony seems to be trending that way. You heard, at least I heard, the prosecutor asking for some sort of opinion. Did you come to an opinion about something? I wasn't sure what that something was. It sounded like that might have caused problems for the defense.
Yeah, of course, because he's qualifying him as a pseudo-ME, medical examiner or a coroner or some type of a doctor. I don't know if they got into this cop's credentials before he joined the force, but I'll bet you he doesn't even have an AA degree in liberal arts. And to be putting him on, to be concluding all of this activity, look, Look at it this way, Michael. If, God forbid, you or your loved ones were ever dumped in a car and left to sink to the bottom of a pond, would you want Officer Wells or Mercy General to diagnose and treat you? Would you ever go to this cop for diagnosis and treatment? Because ultimately, that's what the state is trying to sell this jury. If they can't bring in a real medical doctor or some type of a mechanical engineer or a biomechanical engineer to come in and say that that was plausible, I don't think this witness is competent to say that. And I'd be shocked if they had an in limine hearing before this testimony came in where the court said it is admissible. I truly think this is objectable testimony.
You know, it's interesting because it would really, this is such an important part of the case, right? How she got into that passenger seat of the car. You would think the state would want to make sure that they cross the T's and dot all the I's and bring in a real expert who could say some of the things that he's saying. Some of the things he's saying make sense, some don't. But again, coming from an expert, especially with this critical, I think, testimony that's going to support what this friend is coming in to say, I think would have been useful for the state.
Of course, unless they're relying on the rules in their evidence code that allows for lay opinion to come in. But if that's the case, you don't even need his lay opinion because he wasn't percipient. The jury doesn't need an expert or a lay opinion to try to figure out what happened. You can describe the scene, you can describe the transfer or the mud marks on the side panels, and certainly how she was seated in the car, but to conclude or render an opinion that this is how it all happened, I think it's tremendously misleading to a jury. And hopefully this will be a rigorous cross, or the defense is going to bring in their own sort of real expert in biomechanics or accident reconstruction or a medical doctor to counter this, because I don't think the judge should have allowed any of this in.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about the fact that all of this might be moot, because what this jury saw earlier today was the guy, the star witness for the state. This guy, Stephen Gates, I believe is his name. Yes, Stephen Gates. He was a friend, a good friend of the defendant, and for 25 years, he had given an alibi, which is why it took 25 years for them to arrest this guy. He said, we weren't even at the place where the mud was, where the car was. We never saw her. I was with him. But he changed his tune. Here's what he testified to today. I remember the driver window was down. He walks up to the car. I remember looking in the car, and he gets emotional at this point. I saw Regina crumpled up in the passenger side floor. And then he's asked, where was the defendant? And Stephen says, outside the passenger door. Then he asks him what happened next. Then he says that the defendant tells him, dude, she's expletive dead. Now, just before that, he testified that he didn't see what happened between the two of them. He went to put some equipment away, comes out, the car was moved from one place to by the pond, and he sees the defendant putting her in the car. Now, again, it's 25 years later. He did get immunity for lying to police for all those years. How skeptical will this jury be of that testimony?
They're going to be quite skeptical, and I'll tell you why, Michael. If you think about it, unless he had some kind of bionic vision, if he was standing outside the car, how could he see her crumpled on the floor? I mean, seriously, unless this was some type of a glass vehicle and you could see through it, or you had bionic vision, you don't have the perceptibility or the ability to even perceive what's happening inside the car. You could only see what's going on above the windows, and anything below that is out of the line of sight. So right there, I think it calls his testimony into question. I really do.
The whole testimony? Because the big problem is that he puts Hicks and himself at the scene. Hicks has always said, and he has been saying, they were nowhere near the scene.
The jury is going to get an instruction, and this is in essence what it says. If you feel that the witness lied or misrepresented any fact in a material way, you can disregard anything and everything that the witness testified to. And you can bet that defense counsel is going to hammer home that instruction in closing and say to them, look, that is such a material lie. You could use your common sense as lay jurors without an expert here to know that you cannot see from outside a vehicle what is happening on the floor of a vehicle. So I think that is a material lie, and I think the defense can hang their hat on that instruction to get all of that testimony disregarded. And if that is the case, what are you left with? You're left with a dead ex-wife who had suicidal tendencies or a drug problem found floating at the bottom of a pond. So I don't think that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, we'll have to wait and see. Philip Dubé, stand by.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more key testimony in Ohio versus Paul Hicks. Keep it here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a Hollywood icon and his wife stabbed to death and their own son charged with their murders. Our teams are live with the latest in the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
'Tis the season for true crime. Each morning, we'll dive into a case that took place around the holidays. Join us for the 12 days of holiday crimes.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
All right, we're going to head back to Ohio now for more of the drowned wife murder trial of defendant Paul Hicks. Investigators say that Hicks killed his wife, Regina, back in 2001 by knocking her unconscious and then sending her car into a pond where she ultimately drowned. On the stand right now, still on the stand, is a former Ohio State Highway Patrol investigator. He's now retired, but now he's on cross-examination by the defense.
Or resume.
All right. Who's paying you to be here today?
Absolutely nobody, sir.
Okay. So you're doing this out of the gratuity of your heart?
No, sir. I was called to investigate a case back in 2002, and I followed through with that investigation.
Okay. What have you been doing since April of 2023?
In 2023, I retired from National Interstate Insurance, and I continued to teach part-time for Stark State College at the basic police academies.
Okay. From your resume says your most recent line of work is that of loss control specialist from January 2019 to April 2023. Did I read that correctly?
Nope, that's correct, sir.
Okay. And you'd agree with me, loss control specialist has nothing to do with the State versus Paul Hicks case.
I'm not so sure of that, sir.
Okay. Would you like to tell us how loss control specialist is relevant to this matter?
Sure. It helps me to understand the dynamics of things and to continue my investigative work and being able to dig into things and coming to logical conclusions.
Okay. Doesn't have anything to do with waterborne analysis.
No, sir.
Thank you. From September 2017 to January 2019, you were a civilian background investigator.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Whose background did you investigate in the State versus Paul Hicks?
Nobody, sir.
Adjunct Professor 2017 to 2018, Mount Union College. You're simply teaching in the Sociology Criminal Justice Studies program, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And you teach some courses on crime investigations and blood evidence.
Yes, sir.
Okay. December 2016 to June 2017, 1 year, you are an investigator at the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. Right?
Yes, sir.
And that has nothing to do with the science or waterborne investigation.
It has to do with the ability to continue my investigative work and understand the mechanics of investigation, sir.
You were at the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, okay? Assigned to the Cambridge Developmental Center, okay? internal and administrative investigations related to client rights and policy violations. What in the heck does that have to do with waterborne analysis?
If you read further, it says my duties also included monitoring training exercises and conducting training for other investigators through the Department of Developmental Disabilities. And my duties with that, sir, are related to being able to continue my training and teaching of the different mechanics of investigative methodology, sir.
You'd agree with me the Department of Developmental Disabilities didn't have a lot of investigations that concern crashes or vehicle incidents that included waterborne issues.
I couldn't say that, sir.
Well, name one.
For me personally,
Yes.
I did not, sir. But that doesn't mean that they didn't occur.
You were an investigator with state troopers, Ohio State Highway Patrol from 97, since December 1997 to November 2016, right?
That is correct, sir.
It's fair to say that was your longest tenure, right?
In one position, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And in that role, you did serve as a senior evidence technician, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
As a part of that, you go on in your CV to say that you were assigned complex criminal cases involving money laundering, corruption, and organized crime. Okay? You agree with me that has nothing to do with the subject matter of this case?
It also involved intelligence work. I was the intelligence officer for the Public Corruptions Task Force, and it helped me to develop myself and my expertise in understanding the complex situations that take place.
I'm not debating that you didn't learn things, okay? I'm just asking you, it has nothing to do with the purported testimony you're here in this courtroom in Huron County for.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question, sir.
All I'm saying is you have to agree with me, I would hope, that investigations involving money laundering, corruption, and organized crime have absolutely nothing to do with this case.
The mechanics of the specifics in investigations carry over from one discipline to another, sir. And so that's part of my explanation and why I wrote what I did, sir.
First of all, did you review your CV before coming into court today?
Yes.
Okay, is this, although you don't have any activity for going back to 2023, is it otherwise current?
Yes, sir. The explanation, sir, for where you're talking about the missing part of it being the part-time instructor for the Stark State College is actually further down inside there, sir. I've been a Stark State instructor for almost 30 years.
Right, but again,
and it continued on, sir. My work teaching basic police academies has continued since 1989 up until today.
We're going to go through them all.
Okay, that's fine, sir.
Again, your resume CV stops at April 2020. Fair?
The last entry was for job employment, and because that's the place that I retired from, sir. Yes.
You retired in 2016, if I recall.
I retired from National Interstate Insurance in 2023. I retired from full-time employment, sir.
You talk about your work and expertise in identity theft.
Yes.
Investigation spanned the United States and was instrumental in creating an identity theft work group consisting of local, state, and federal agencies who investigated ID theft cases around the state. Be that as it may, ID theft investigation has no bearing on the case that's before these people here in Huron County. Fair?
And again, sir, I would repeat myself in explaining that anything that we do in the investigative work has a carryover for the investigative techniques that branch from one to another.
Well, this jury heard from several DCI agents, okay? We've heard from 6 experts in this case, okay? And I didn't object to any one of them. Mr. Whiteman from DCI is a DNA analyst, okay? Do you have any reason to dispute? That's what he does, day in, day out, week in, week out.
Give me a second.
All right, so as expected, the defense attacking the expertise and the resume of this particular witness, and perhaps a little too vigorously. That's why they ended up having to go to sidebar.